section there that has a transmission fee of $2 per megawatt hour.
I got the machine running here finally, so I'm just going to hand it over to Tim for a second. So Tim found this article, and I'll just, if you want to take a few minutes and walk through it for the camera. I know we've been discussing it here in the class, but go ahead and just scroll down through that. I think if it's not.
All right, so not totally. We do deal with this. You'll see this in some of the other energy classes, but it is about renewable energy. And this is kind of one of the reasons we always say, why can't we just implement wind energy? The system is really stacked against us right now, against renewable energy, because the existing players, the utility companies, have been in it for 150 years now. And this article brings up coal strip shutting down. They have a lot of capacity for transmission to transmit power. Washington State needs power, needs electricity. They don't have wind in the wintertime like we do. They're looking at building a 500 wind turbine wind farm in Forsyth. And the issue is transmission. They've already got the funding and everything, but they can't build it because of transmission. Bonneville Power Authority, who owns the transmission lines, has a section starting at Townsend that's 90 miles long that has a surcharge for transmitting electricity. Nowhere else in their 15,000 miles do they have that anywhere except for that 90-mile stretch, which is coincidentally right where that wind farm needs to go through to transmit. It's a $2 surcharge per megawatt of electricity, which makes it unable to compete with coal or natural gas or any fossil fuel electric generation because it has to go through that.
Why do they have that surcharge?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out, and nobody knows for sure. I suppose if you do enough research on it, maybe they're, I don't know the exact bill, so I don't know what, where that came from, but we do know it is decades old. And the article doesn't go into that, so I'm going to do a little more research and find out.
So that was there before they even started to think about the wind farm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's been put in, and odds are, I would think, that was a surcharge on that particular stretch to pay for the high cost of installing transmission lines there. Odds are, maybe that one cost more to put in, or if they didn't have the funding, small customer base, so, hey, let's put a $2 fee on it to pay it off. At what point is it paid off? It might be paid off now. I don't know. BPA's, Bonneville Power Administration, they own the transmission lines. They're the ones that are charging the surcharge. It's a non-for-profit organization that gets federal loans to build transmission lines. They own the transmission lines. Then they charge a surcharge to be able to return to pay back those loans. They are non-profit, so they can't make any money on it. So once that's paid off, technically, that should be the end of the charges, right? Everything should be free. Of course, they've got maintenance and upkeep and everything, so there is going to be a cost to it. But everybody's trying to figure out, why is this 90-mile stretch a surcharge? So what happens in the middle of Montana, kind of where Townsend is? What is there that would be like critical infrastructure to us? Any idea? It's kind of where the grid line comes down. Washington State is on its own grid, right? The Pacific Coast is on its own grid, or own section of the grid. That line runs right down through Montana.
Continental Divide?
It might be on the Continental Divide. I'm not sure exactly where the line is, but odds are that is a grid point. It's one of those choke points, and that's why they're charging. So it's not as simple as, hey, let's just send our electricity to Washington State, because now we have to go through that grid choke point, which happens to work out to be right about there.
Is the choke point actually where the DC coupling is? Do we know? That's what I'm
Yeah, and that's the thing. This article is not
It's
super
not that
clear on.
But one thing to make clear to the students is that there is a DC couple between the eastern grid and the western grid in Montana, because it's too difficult to keep the entire continent on the same phase. We all run at 60 hertz, but it's just too difficult to keep Los Angeles and New York City running exactly in sync. And so that one of those.
So it'll be a lot of
Yeah,
transformers.
and it could be that this is what we're talking about. But on the other hand, like somebody put those infrastructure, there's something like 10, giant copper cables, and I don't know exactly how big, but just imagine like 10 cables about, a foot in diameter where these two grids collide or the choke point. And again, somebody paid for that up front, and they want to get their money back, so where's the fee going? Is it actually paying back the capital that somebody took to install this thing back in the day? I don't know, but anyway.
So anyhow, Clearwater Wind Farm, they're looking to build near Forsyth. It's going to be enough to power 300,000 homes, and they really want to transmit it to Washington. And so we have some folks here that are involved with this. Sierra Club is part of the challenge, and MEIC, Montana Environmental Information Center, they're looking to resolve this problem. And there you see, charges existed for decades, and it's unique. 15,000 miles of transmission lines, and that fee only applies to that 90 miles near Townsend. So, depending on where you're located at, your generation, electricity generation is located at, you can pay double the price to transmit it out of the area that anybody else is, if you have to go through that 90-mile choke point. So $2 a megawatt hour, and it's cutting the competition.
So $2 a megawatt hour, what's that per kilowatt hour? And it's only 0.2 of a cent, right?
Right.
0.2 of a cent,
But it's double what the other transmission fees are. So, and it would add up at, because that's what they deal with is megawatt hours, they don't even look at kilowatt hours as far as that goes. But if they're buying it by the megawatt hour and say it is $25 for a megawatt hour of electricity from Colstrip, and now all of a sudden, hey, I've got this wind farm right next door to it, but it's going to cost $27, you know which one they're going to choose, right? So this is one of those impediments that's in the way. This is it's in the Billings Gazette from 2 days ago, and Brad just put up the link on the forum.
Yeah.
So definitely take a look at it. Feel free to do some research and tell us about it. I know I'm going to go back and do some research and find out why that choke point is there, why that problem is. This tells a lot about it. It talks about we have good wind in the wintertime, and Washington, Columbia River Gorge does not have good wind. They're also low on their hydro power during that time because the rivers are low, their water flow is low because it's all locked up in snow in the mountains. Spring and summer is their hydro time.
Yeah, I think it says that. Just scroll down and tell you a bit there.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. What's public testimony period? When is that?
Let's see.
We've had students from the Energy Tech program.
It's in January.
Yeah.
January, they're going to accept public testimony about the rate charges, and that's how BPA determines how much money it needs to charge customers. So the concern is, like we talked about earlier, was that initially put in there to pay the costs of it and they just forgot to take it off?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that's intentional that we're trying to keep the competition out? Technically, in a nonprofit organization, there should not be anything there for competition-wise, right? Shouldn't matter. But these are the kind of roadblocks, if you get into renewable energy, this is what you're going to see all over the place.
Yeah. This is a large-scale example, and then we'll talk about small-scale examples too in terms of net metering, deciding to put a solar PV on your roof, that you can, currently you can approximately break even, but you're not going to make money on it. with the current energy laws?
I have I just actually got my house looked at for solar panels, and she sent me all the diagrams and charts and everything for the whole entire process, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it shows how much percentage from which side of the house
Yeah.
and everything.
So that's out there. I encourage you to take a look at the link, do some research on it, and see, you know what, maybe it's worth a trip over to Helena in January to say, hey,
Yeah.
well, what's going on here? You know, and maybe they need to realize that there are people besides just the wind companies, you know, that notice this stuff, are aware of it. And, you know, you as a concerned citizen want to know why you can't, why can't we do wind? So
It just seems like it should be already paid, and it should just be done.
maybe, and it may not, because maybe nobody's ever transported, and they said, we're not paying that, and they did a different transmission line, so maybe they haven't collected their funds yet.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Well, and all of these various energy infrastructures have in place what's called a power, PPA, power purchase agreement, and we did a little bit of time value of money. Remember when we talked about, what's $1 worth today versus down the road, and so all of these projects have, some kind of payback period built into it.
Well, and for your awareness, the stuff that you've seen here locally in the past couple of years, Northwest Energy bought all the hydroelectric dams in Montana, right?
Except for the one at Salish and Kootenai.
Red
Yep.
Bay.
So it makes you wonder, it's like, why would they do that? Well, it turns out there's a mandate that they have to get a certain percentage, and I think right now it's 10, but it does increase.
Yeah.
10% of their electricity has to come from renewable energy. So up until that time, the only game in town was buying from other people. They had to buy from whoever owned the hydroelectric dam. They had to buy from Judith Gap. They had to buy from all these other places. Well, by them owning the hydroelectric dams, now they don't have to buy from anybody else. And they, as a cost-saving measure, they can obviously generate it as their own infrastructure cheaper than they can buy it from somebody else. So Judith Gap is in a contract with Northwest Energy that they will buy so much electricity from them on that contract, but not a watt more.
No.
And they'll flip the switch when it comes time. So if you ever wonder when you're driving past these wind farms and you're like, man, all this capacity and the wind's blowing really good, why aren't these things spinning? Well, there's zero storage.
Yeah.
We got nowhere to put it. The grid's full, and they're not going to shut down their coal-fired power plant that takes 12 hours to start up. They're not going to shut that down for a temporary drop or rise in the.
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting too, though, is because the Judith Gap and I don't know, well, there's different ways to furl the blades so they, aren't spinning, but if they have the potential to run at capacity, Northwestern Energy actually has to pay them for what they would have made.
Oh, wow.
So, you'd think down the road, it would be in our best interest to actually build some storage,
Yeah.
so that you actually do get that energy and that money later.
Wow.
So anyhow, that's the story. I encourage you to go look at it.
Cool story.
All right, guys. Thanks, Tim. All right. I'll take a little break here, and then I'll do my best to get through the remainder of the figures and the penalties chapter.